Oh, you had a thumbs up. I think that means we're live.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's already afternoon. Yeah, noon.
Noon. It's
Afternoon,
noon.
6
Yes.
minutes ago.
All right.
Welcome to Black and White Theology, episode number 6. We are coming to you live from Sellersville, Pennsylvania.
Woohoo!
Yes.
I used to hang out here with no, I didn't. No, I didn't.
So we're podcasting. We're doing our podcast a day early this week.
That's right. Yep.
Because Ron and Monique is Ron's wife, in case you didn't know.
Thank you for clearing that up. That could have caused some
Just so
problems.
there's no lack of confusion there.
No lack of
So
confusion.
You guys are heading away.
Don't say where.
Alone time.
Yes, for some alone time. 26 years of marriage. Amen. 26 years, man. Tomorrow, the 23rd.
Nice.
So had to do this early.
Hey, did we have some cool podcast intro music playing, John?
Awesome. So we would love to know what you feel about the podcast music intro. John Schwartz picked that out.
John Zwart.
Zwart. And so let me know what you think about that, all right? And if we need to change it, we can change it up. But
How long have you known me?
let's see.
What's my last name?
Your last name is Wart. Wait, not Wart, Swart.
Warts?
Wait, I got this. Zwart.
There you go.
Zwart. You
Z-Wart.
got to put the Z in
Zwart.
there.
that-
John Z. I just like to call him Johnny Z because that's more like, yo, Johnny Z, you got the package? Oh, anyway. Jay-Z. Yeah, Jay-Z. Let's call, yeah, we can call him Jay-Z.
Anyway, happy anniversary, 26
Thank you.
years. Is that
Thank you.
Tomorrow, today?
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, all right.
Tomorrow.
I just celebrated 19.
Awesome. I remember 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really second. No,
Young,
no.
young and in love.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm at 26 and I'm old and still in love. So it's all good, man. Keep Christ in the middle.
Yeah.
It'll always work out.
Well, congratulations on that. Hope you guys have a good time away. But until then, we got some discussion to do, some work to
Yeah.
do. Before we begin today, let's go ahead and I wanted to give you an opportunity just to talk a little bit about Allentown Fellowship Church.
Yeah.
And the work that God's called you to up there, and just kind of share just kind of the 5-minute story about God calling you away from Sellersville and Faith Church and back into like the urban area to be a pastor up there and to actually plant a church.
Yep. Yeah. So as you guys know, we've been here at Faith serving together for the last 16 years, and over the last year, I began to pray, Lord, am I doing what you want me to do? It's kind of like one of those check-in with the Lord type prayers, teaching at the college part-time, here at the school full-time, here as a lay elder. And it's like, I'll continue to do these things for you, Lord. I just want to impact the kingdom wherever you want me to. So anyway, God began to move in my heart, and I just start feeling this unrest. It's like, no, there's something else I need you to do. And I'm thinking, wow, what? And so start praying about it. Monique and I took I would say over a year of just wrestling with God before I even really said anything to anybody. Long story short, came to be go plan to work. Go plan to work. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I've been a lay pastor for all these years and counseling and all the things that I do. Why go plan to work now? Well, again, God had to remind me, it's kind of like when I called you to Sellersville, and that didn't make sense either. So we prayed about it, obviously talked to you guys, and God laid it on our heart to go start this work in Allentown. Why Allentown? I always tell people, I've always kind of felt like, where the Apostle Paul says, my heart is for my people Israel. I've always felt that about Philly and the urban city. I mean, I was born and raised in Philly, so you kind of, you know the culture, and you just like, man, I want to go back and give the urban context the gospel. So Monique and I talked about it, prayed about it. Is it Philly? Is it no? And it was like doors were shutting, and then ended up being Allentown, which is kind of like a small Philadelphia. Have the different areas, but we're in an area where there is drug addiction. There's all the same crimes that are in every city, but they're there too. People coming out of incarceration, trying to get back into society. I mean, so we just want to reach that particular group of people. And so it ended up being Allentown, and Allentown Fellowship got launched back in February, had 4 services, got shut down with COVID, and now we just got back in our building.
Where are you guys meeting?
So we're meeting in the Dubs Memorial Community Center.
Okay.
in what is called the Daybreak Room, which is their soup kitchen. Daybreak Room is kind of like where they come in, anybody can come in and just have a free meal. I think they serve 2 free meals there, Monday to Friday. Haven't opened all that back up yet because of COVID, but that's the room that we are having our services in. And so now we're just trying to find ways to reach people of Allentown. So we've been doing some Facebook ads, getting some clicks on that. People,
Are you inviting
you know.
them to a Sunday morning experience, worship experience?
No.
Really? You haven't tried to give them an experience?
No, we don't have it. Yeah, we are just proclaiming Christ.
Really?
We are just using the Word of God. I said, as a matter of fact, Sunday in our message Sunday, I said, we don't have tricks here. There's no, I don't have free stuff to give you. It's just I have Christ. I have the gospel. But we're centered on preaching the gospel. We're centered on just getting out into the community. And obviously, my passion is counseling, so I'm going to use that as a tool to start doing some counseling classes on addictions and on marriage, communication, and hopefully we can draw people out that way and just point them to Christ. So, simple church, man.
Yep. Do you have a website?
We do. No, we don't. Yes, wait, we do. We do. Okay, wait.
Do you or do you not have a website?
Your Honor, I was at a Bible study. I'm sorry, I just had flashbacks. All right, I'm sorry. We do have a website. It's not live yet.
Okay.
Yeah, Matthew.
construction.
Yeah, Matthew, my son is working on that. It's under construction. We do have a YouTube channel,
Okay.
Allentown Fellowship, so
Okay.
you can go on there and hear the sermons. And then we have a Facebook page, Allentown Fellowship, and we live stream every Sunday on there too.
So you're
yeah.
meeting live and in person.
Yeah, we just went back.
Community center now.
Yep, we just went back, and our services are at 1 o'clock.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so, yeah.
If you want any information about Allentown Fellowship Church, just connect with the Facebook page right now.
Yep, and we do have an email, allentownfellowship@gmail.com.
All right.
Real simple.
Excellent. Well, we'll continue to keep everybody posted and updated on the work that God's doing up in Allentown as we continue to podcast and talk about ministry.
Awesome.
And at some point here in the future, I imagine the next month or so, we're going to move on from our discussion of race and culture and how it affects the
Yeah.
church, and we will move into other things. And so I kind of make light of inviting people to a worship experience. So we're going to talk about philosophy of ministry and how that impacts the average everyday Christian. We're going to talk about modern American evangelicalism and the state of American evangelicalism and in North America, and just really kind of get at the heart of some of the issues that we've personally talked about and see within the North American church, especially in light of what's happening now within the culture. So we've moved from pandemic to race and even discussions of history and tearing down of statues and now going after. I mean, they're going after Jesus even right now, white Jesus.
The white Jesus.
The white
Yep.
Jesus, which
Yep.
maybe you can provide some clarity on. I thought Jesus was Jewish.
I believe he still is.
Okay, all right. But he was not European.
Right.
And yet, I think there are some that would say Jesus is this symbol of European white privilege.
Right. Yes.
Somehow, which we do want to get into that today and discuss this whole concept of white privilege, because I
Right.
think there's a lot of confusion around that,
Mm-hmm.
and then look at it from a biblical perspective.
Yep.
Before we do that, I want to hit this topic that we've been dancing around a little bit with regards to what we in the culture call color blindness. And so white people, for the past few years, when race has become a discussion and it comes up, white people like to say, well, I'm colorblind, I don't see the color of your skin, I just, accept you for who you are, right? Kind of like the Martin Luther King Jr., judge me not by the color of my skin,
Right.
but the content of my character. And I actually think the heartbeat behind white people saying they're colorblind, I think ultimately comes from that heartbeat. I don't want to judge you by the color of your skin,
Right.
but by the content
Yes.
of your character. I have heard in recent days a lot of people in the black community kind of bristle at that and say, no, color blindness, we don't want that. That's a negative thing. So talk about why the black community says, no, we don't want to be colorblind.
Yeah, I think for many to say you're colorblind is to say you are oblivious to the racism that's out there.
Okay.
Take it a step further. it's being interpreted as you don't believe that there's systemic racism out there. So it's almost like for some blacks, and not all. I always try to make sure when we're talking about this topic that we don't use, words like all.
I'm sorry.
Right.
My son just texted me asking if he could play Xbox, and I tried to respond, and I hit the wrong button. And my phone
No
dinged.
problem. No problem.
That's my bad. I will give you undivided attention now that I turned.
I appreciate it because I felt like you weren't even listening.
I was.
Like I think this is part of the problem today, people. When a black man or half of a black man tries to talk, all right. All right. Do I have your undivided? Do I have your attention? All right. Yeah. Okay. No, so
Your mic is kind of low.
Mine is?
Yeah, and I turned it up all the way.
Check 1, 2. Is that? I mean, are you
excuse
getting
us,
okay?
folk, as we trying to.
I put this new
fix this.
cable on.
It's just two different levels.
Is it? Well, let me grab another cable here, and we'll fix that. So just give us a moment. You can talk, Ron. I really won't be paying attention.
Oh wow! So as Doug leaves, because the mic is something's going on with his mic, so it just gives me an opportunity, America, to really talk to you. Let me talk to you about what's really going on. No, I'm just joking. We appreciate you guys that do tune in and that watch this podcast or listen to the podcast. I think you guys know. If you don't know, Doug and I have known each other for a long time, and a lot of people are struggling with the issues that are out there. And again, we honestly want to try to keep bringing the issues back to a biblical perspective. Again, so are you good, man?
I am. I put a new cable on, so John, our producer John, was telling me that I was getting really low audio levels. So I changed my one cable out because I thought it was bad,
Okay.
and put it in for a cable that might have been worse.
Maybe his is only picking you.
Yeah, that might have been it. Yeah.
You're not on yet.
Okay.
John's trying to.
He's trying to see if
Hey,
it's
we're
coming
still
through.
trying to get it all together here.
Yeah, that's that's what I like about this. This is like not scripted. This
Not
is
at all.
this is just real. I mean, your son texting you in the middle of it and
Nothing, huh?
phone going off, not
I
working.
think his is picking yours up.
Oh, so you're not even getting sound.
All right, you can keep talking.
All right. So as we're trying to figure out what's going on here with the mic. Again, our heartbeat. One of the things that we do want to do with this particular podcast, although the last number of podcasts, really all of them, are really centered around this topic of race and what's going on in our culture right now. We are going to eventually get into other topics, and so this was a great idea. I mean, Doug came up with this idea. Hey, in light of our culture and what's going on racially, let's get together and let's just talk about it. I mean, you have a different perspective. You grew up in this, and so obviously that's what kind of birthed this podcast. But the more we talked about it too, we said, we don't want to just talk about race. While that is important that we deal with what's in the headlines, let's just keep this thing going and let's start talking about theological issues. I would love for us to get into counseling issues and how do we navigate through all of these different issues with a biblical perspective. So hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Again, it's not scripted. We obviously know what topics we're going to talk about, and then we just have a conversation. And, as we're having a conversation about race these last couple of podcasts, I've heard from some of you guys that you've been enjoying it. It's been helping to bring some clarity, and thank God for that, because that's what we're trying to do. But again, always trying to bring it back to a biblical perspective. We know we live in a broken world. And all things are not going to be absolutely right until Christ comes and we have new heavens and a new earth. I mean, that's the Christian worldview. But we have to deal with what's going on until that time. And I think for us who profess to know Christ, we have to make sure that we're not getting caught up in emotion, but we are always bringing a biblical worldview to the situation at hand. And again, looking for opportunities to proclaim Christ, because man's greatest need is reconciliation with a holy God, the holy God. So that's kind of a little bit of our heartbeat for why we want to do this podcast. And so you guys keep praying for us. You guys who do watch and listen, if you got topics that you would like for us to address, reach out to us and say, hey, I would love to hear you guys do a podcast on this issue or on that issue. We're definitely open to that too. All right? All right, how we doing with our mics, man?
I don't know.
It's just not working at all, huh?
Hey, John, go ahead and bring Ron's all the way down. And then
Wow. Is there something in here that could go bad inside the actual?
we just do this little test here.
All right. Testing 1, 2. Can you still hear me, John?
Now, it should be coming out of channel 1 now.
Can you hear me, John? Yep.
So that mic's bad.
So the mic is bad. Okay, so those who are tuning in, we have determined that the mic is bad. So you can send that word out, text, tweet it, that we've determined the mic is bad. So Doug is now going to get the much cheaper mic. And his little fancy mic that he thought was going to do the trick, it's not working. All right, there we go.
How's that, John? Any better?
All right.
You got?
Yes, testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2.
You got me?
All right, we're back. I think we're back.
All right. That's what
All right.
you. That's what you get for Amazon. Amazon.com. All right, we good? All right.
Excellent. Okay.
So,
Welcome back.
for everyone who stayed with us through all that was very good, by the way, Ron. You just came up with all that off the cuff.
I just came up with that. I was raised. Anyway, I'm not gonna go there. Go ahead.
All right, so we were talking colorblind.
Yeah, and how it comes across to some black
Yeah.
people, not all blacks. I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Those can actually come across as really belittling the whole situation, of really making the reality of racism seem like it's not real.
Okay.
And so it kind of diminishes the whole issue, and then you kind of lose credibility.
Okay.
I've heard people sometimes say, I don't see color. I don't care if you're pink, polka dot, or yellow. Again, the heartbeat behind that, trying to express that I'm not a racist person, but there are no people who are pink or polka dot or yellow. And that can actually backfire in somebody's mind, like, wow, you're even using examples that aren't even racist.
Yeah.
So again, using that type of, and again, the white person who says that might say, oh, come on, that's not what I meant. And I understand that frustration. I have a lot of white friends that say, Ron, I can't say anything. If I say this, I get slammed.
Yep.
If I try to say what's in my heart, I get slammed. And that's unfortunate because there is a lot of emotion in this, and sometimes people don't hear the heartbeat
Right.
of someone who really is trying to express what's truly in their heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, so saying I'm colorblind, that's probably not the best thing to say.
Yeah. Well, and what I've heard too is it just ignores reality.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Because
Right.
you are black, right?
Right,
And so don't ignore that.
right.
I think the way the Bible would push us toward is regardless of color,
Yes.
there is color.
Yep.
Right? There is black people, there is white people, there's Jews, right? In the New Testament it was Jew and Gentile and Greeks, and the Bible uses some other categories, barbarians and Scythians and so it doesn't remove those racial identifications or distinctions, right?
They're okay.
Yeah. Rather, we should celebrate, and this is where I think we need to work as individuals, whether we're black or white, celebrating the differences
Absolutely.
that exist between us.
Yep.
So, for instance, you mentioned when you grew up in the inner city that if you talk about the urban kind of black church and their style of worship, it's very emotive, right? Hands in the air, emotions,
Yep.
you know, clapping, you know,
Yep.
even dancing and
Yep.
things like that.
The length of the service.
Yeah, length of the service.
2
right?
hour service, no problem.
Right. When you're speaking and preaching to a primarily black congregation, they tend to talk back to you. a
Very
lot,
vocal.
You know.
Yep. Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
Preach it.
Yeah,
Say
right?
it. Say it.
You come up here, you know, to predominantly white, kind of European, Dutch, German kind of ancestry,
Yeah.
and you know they sit very quiet. You know, you say something that you think is funny, and they
Yep.
don't laugh very much.
Yeah.
You know, you might get a little, you know,
Right. Right.
you know, oh, I got you right.
Yeah.
And yet, neither is right and neither is wrong.
Yeah.
Right. They're just reflections of culture.
Yep.
Okay. So if the white people look at the black church and says, oh, they need to settle down to, it's all emotion, it's all show,
Yeah.
it's all
and,
this.
And I've been told that by
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, and then the black community can look at the church and say, well, you guys need to, you know, get out, you know, you're the frozen chosen. You need to,
Yep.
you know, are you even alive? You
Yep.
know, and,
Yep.
and maybe there's some fair criticism on both sides, right?
Sure,
Maybe some things can be done a little bit too much
Mhm.
for emotion or show, and there's not real substance there. On the other side, maybe, you know, white people in the suburbs can be a little more emotive and learn to express their worship in various ways
Yep.
that they've maybe not felt comfortable with. So fair enough, there's criticism of both.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
rather than criticize predominantly, I think there should be a way of celebrating differences and learning from one another.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's. I mean, God is a creative. Is a creative God,
Mhm.
right? I mean, God's look at the diversity among the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
Right. I forget now, so don't quote me on this. But Hannah was telling me when she was at One Life, some guy came in just talking about like insects, and it was just a huge number of like beetles that are out there.
Mhm.
And you know, as they're sitting there listening to all these presentations, and it was like, but his point was, do you see how creative God is?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so the same thing within the human race. There are so many different ethnic groups, and man, it's awesome when you get to meet people of a different ethnic group.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you went to Africa, I went to Africa, I went to China, and you meet these people, and it's like, wow, it just broadens your, I don't know, your respect for humanity, I
Yep.
guess,
Yep.
and how creative people can
And
be.
this is why some churches try to do a mixed kind of styles of worship,
Mhm.
you know, where you
Yeah.
might have an African kind of flavor one
Yep.
week and more of a Hispanic. And again, and we talked about this a little bit, that's great and that's good in the right context, you know,
Yes.
in the right environment.
Yeah.
Again, if you maybe try some of that with a 90% white church and a 90% white community, you know.
Yeah, it's not going to go over well,
Ri-
probably.
Right. But I think looking, you know, it's at different cultures and saying, okay, what can I learn from them?
Yeah.
Rather than criticize one another
Mhm.
because of the differences, or I don't like that, or I don't like that. How can we celebrate the differences and learn? And therefore, being colorblind recognizes there are some cultural differences.
Right.
It recognizes that there is a difference of ethnicity and skin color and everything like that, and that's okay. Let's celebrate
Mhm.
that. Let's learn from one another. And if we can proceed with that mindset, I think you'll look more biblical
Yeah,
in your approach
absolutely,
to
absolutely.
race and racism in the church. But we have a topic we have to talk about that produces a high level of confusion with people in the church, because you hear about it on the news, in articles that you read on the internet, and this topic of white privilege.
Mm.
And you get everything from white privilege is a myth, it doesn't exist, to, oh, no, you have to know and identify your privilege. That way you can better maybe conduct yourself with people who haven't experienced privilege. So talk about white privilege. If you could maybe kind of define it. Is it a thing? Is it a myth? Is it a social construct used to divide races?
Right. Yeah.
And so let's talk around that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, you know, when you start talking about white privilege, if you're talking to white privilege to a white person, typically the defenses are going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I've heard. Hi, John. It's good to see you. How are you doing, sir? Everybody, that was John.
Cameras on
You
you, they
couldn't
couldn't
see
even see him.
Oh, okay.
That's
cool.
how good he is.
John is good. Okay. The defenses go up, and so we start. If I walk up to probably just a white person and just say, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in white privilege?" Here's some of the responses I would get. I don't see color. I don't think that's real. I didn't have privilege growing up. Like right away, there's usually a defensive answer. I grew up in the projects. I'm white. My mom was on welfare. All this stuff about white privilege. I mean, this is like so wrong because I'm a white guy and I did not have privilege. So, and I think here's where we're making the mistake, okay? That particular white person I'm speaking of who grew up in the projects, who grew up on welfare and on food stamps, he hears white privilege and is looking at it as if that term means that all whites have privilege. That's not the way to look at this term. Now, again, you might talk to other people who people still believe that and say, well, no, if you're white, you're going to have privilege. Well,
But by the very nature of the color
Of the color of your skin.
you
So we'll-
automatically
yeah.
have a level of privilege that black people don't have.
right. And let me address that after
Okay.
I kind of define white privilege in this broader sense.
Okay.
So when a white person responds that way, I grew up poor, I grew up on food stamps. Okay, set that personal individual experience aside for a minute. But there is such a thing as white privilege that did exist in our country. What do we mean by that? Jim Crow laws, where it was written in the law to enforce racism. The federal housing, right?
Yep.
Where it was written, and we talked about this a little bit, right? It was in the law not to give mortgages to black folk. So in that sense, there was a very real white privilege that was granted to the white race, and it was backed by local and federal law. That white privilege historically did exist. You just go and just look at the laws.
Yep.
All right, so we know it existed. Now the question becomes, is that still the case today?
Okay.
And I think what's happening, we're mixing the two up. We're mixing your personal experience as a white person, your individual experience and what you experience versus systemically, you'll hear that word, what was backed by law. Okay, the laws backed that if you were white, you were privileged. I mean, we can keep going back all the way to where the black person wasn't even considered a full human. That's a form of white privilege because if you're not white, then you're not a full human. That was on the law books. So that term, all of that is wrapped up into that, okay? So that's one thing. All right, now the question becomes this. Here we are in 2020. Is there still such a thing as white privilege? Here's what I say to people. Show me what law you're talking about. Because I know the laws were written that favored white people. Nobody can argue that. You can go back and do your history. Show me today where the federal housing says don't give loans to black people. Well, that's why the Federal Housing Act came along and said, okay, we can't do that.
So wouldn't the pushback to that be, yeah, certainly maybe there aren't any laws on the books that are
Right.
being enforced today that favor white people over black people.
Right.
Maybe you could find one or two somewhere,
yeah.
but as far as laws being consistently enforced that favor white people over black people, probably difficult to find in our country. However, the ripple effects of
Okay, that's a
that-
different conversation.
Okay.
Absolutely. The ripple effect is still out there, and I would agree with
Okay.
that. I use the analogy again. I might have used it before when we were talking. If you see a dead skunk in the middle of the road and you swerve and go around it, you're going to smell that skunk probably for the next mile. So while those actual black and white laws may no longer be on the books, the stench of them does still exist. And that's what I tell my white friends you have to understand. There's a difference. You say, well, Ron, you're allowed to apply to any college you want now. That's true. But if the laws were in place, the skunk is dead now, the ripple effect has not all gone away.
Breaking the generational cycle of poverty is very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think that's something white people that live in suburbia have a difficult time grasping sometimes.
Yeah.
So if generationally there's been just a cycle of poverty, and with poverty comes higher crime, right? So that's why sometimes we ask, do we have a race issue or do we have a poverty issue, right? Well, kind of yes and yes.
Right.
If because of laws in the past, people were pushed into poverty, that cycle continues from one generation to the next. Even though those laws are abolished, you still have this cycle of poverty that's very difficult to get out of. And I only say this because I've seen it in the urban centers and the urban churches that we've had connections with over the years. We've had a really close relationship with a church plant in Camden, New Jersey. And as far as urban areas go, it doesn't get much worse than Camden, New Jersey. We'd go down there and just listening to Paul Robinson, our brother who planted a church down there, and talk about just the cycle of poverty and how difficult it is, because those environments just suck the boys who become men in.
Yeah.
Those cultures,
Yeah.
it's so hard for those guys. Even though, okay, so they receive Christ, they start becoming discipled, and then all of a sudden there's this tug back into that, and it's hard. And I've seen it with these young men trying to break that cycle. It's not. Even though there's, I can apply and go to any college.
Right.
To them, that might as well.
Yep,
not
that's a
even
pipe
be.
dream.
It's not. It's a pipe dream.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever. They had me go to college, right?
Yeah.
And we look at that and say, yeah, you can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to, right?
Right.
You talk to them in the city, like, yeah, whatever. You don't know my circumstances. And so breaking that cycle of poverty, even though the laws aren't there, is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's just something to be aware of. Whereas,
Yeah, we should do a whole separate podcast on that issue.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
that deals not only with the effects of a mindset that those generations have bought into, but it brings up the issue of ownership. It brings up the issue of victim mentality. It brings up a lot of different issues. Because you're right, if the laws have been changed that say now there's equality, why is this segment of people still going backwards?
Yep.
Right?
or not, at the very minimum, not progressing
Absolutely.
forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to throw it out there, just one little thing. The absence of fathers in those homes is one big factor.
And so going along this conversation, do you think that the absence of fathers in homes can be traced back to systemic, injustice within our country?
Not all of it.
Okay.
I don't agree that because of the systemic racism that was in our country through the law books, local and federal, that is directly the main reason why you have urban homes without black fathers in the home, rather they're in prison.
It's 70% is the last number I
It's a
heard.
big number.
70% of black kids growing up in America, I think,
Right.
are in fatherless homes.
Yeah. And now, again, this is where people are going to say, well, why are more black men in prison? Because we go back to the unjust law system where a white guy can afford the attorney, so he gets probation. The same crime, the black guy can't afford an attorney, he gets a public defender and gets 10 to 15 years. Okay, is that part of the problem? Absolutely, that's part of the problem.
Okay.
Come from a family of law enforcement, and surely that happens. You can go and research cases. Is that the sole issue? No, it's not. And this is not one of those things where sometimes, I hear people say, well, this is the problem. There are layers of issues going on here. Because growing up in the inner city, I've talked to some of these black men. And I'm like, so why won't you go down to the Walmart and apply for it? Man, I ain't got time for that. That's better than no money. Nah, man, I ain't doing that, man. But you got a 40 in your hand. Like, where'd you get money for that? Well, I got to do what I got to do. Okay, so now is that
Yeah.
systemic racism's problem?
Right.
No, that's this guy not taking ownership.
So I asked you, I think off camera last week, you and how many brothers do you have?
So I got 5.
You have 5 brothers.
5, yep.
So
I'm
You're
where am I at? I'm somewhere in there.
yeah. So six
6
Jones,
boys and
6
2 girls.
6 Jones boys, 2 girls,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And I've met many of your brothers in law enforcement down in
Yep.
Philadelphia. Great guys, making a difference in their community, trying to love their families,
Mhm.
right? So what made the difference for the Jones boys?
Dad.
Okay.
Dad was no nonsense. Dad was military and law enforcement himself, and he would not accept excuses.
Mhm.
He worked, he was a workhorse, probably to his own detriment. But he would tell us when he got married and he and my mom started having kids, he said at that point he knew he had to make a decision. Either he's going to continue in his jazz mode of playing in the clubs and stuff and all that comes with that, the drinking and the lifestyle.
And he
or-
experienced real racism.
Oh,
throughout
absolutely,
his life.
absolutely. He said I had to make a fundamental decision that I have to let that lifestyle go and focus on you kids. And that's exactly what he did. I never remember my dad having but 2 friends. 2 friends, Barbara and Bonner and Mary and Tootie. Those are the 2 couples I remember. He didn't go out.
Yeah.
He worked, came home, and engaged with us. He worked a lot, but when he was home, he was like, let's go. We're going to the Short Park. Let's go. We're going. He was there. And then when it came to education, he was on us. Did you do your homework? Let me see. I was like, oh, come on, Dad. I don't have anything to do. And so he was a very disciplinarian father that was big about education and would not accept excuses from us.
And so if you remove that from the home,
Oh, I know for a fact we would not be where we are today.
Yeah.
I know it. I mean, he was the one that ran the tight ship. He was the one that set the rules, right?
Yep.
And again, my mom was there. She loved on us. She made sure we were fed. She made sure we were clothed. But Dad was there watching over us kind of like a hawk to make sure you're not going to end up out in that street
And-
doing all kinds of foolishness.
and he wasn't a Christian during those years.
No. As a matter of fact, he would say, you're going to act like they act in the street, I'm going to kick you out and you can go live in the street. So we saw that example, right? So if you remove that, just by the way that they were wired and my mom's personality was so different, we would have done so much more stuff. I mean, we still did stuff. We weren't perfect kids. I still remember the day I climbed up on top of the apartment complex and we're throwing rocks down Deceptibuses. And I look over in my driveway and my dad's standing there looking at me. I knew, that's it, I'm dead, Hey, just tell my girlfriend I love her, right? But if he were not in our life, our lives would have been different.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact. And again,
When you look at just the biblical role of a father
yeah,
in the Bible,
yeah.
it does make it really difficult for kids, because I even see it, raising my own kids now, and they kick and they scream and they're teenagers and they argue, but just that consistent, steady, my son asked me the other day, why do you take everything from me? I said, because I'm a good dad, or I'm trying to be a good dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's why.
Yep.
Well, I don't like it. I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know. But the alternative, I know what the alternative is.
Right.
And so in the urban centers where 70% are growing up without a father, that cycle just continues.
It does,
and
man.
continues and continues.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so my next question is, what is the church's role, or how can the church help in that
yeah.
space?
We need strong Christian men to step in and be surrogate fathers.
Okay.
That would solve, I believe, a huge amount of the problem in the inner city.
Yeah.
You look at all the churches in the inner city where there are strong men, strong fathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't each of us make sure we adopt a home?
Mm-hmm.
and
So-
sit down and say to that single mother or that grandmother in many cases, listen, we want to partner with you
Yeah.
to help be that model, that role model that we know your 12-year-old boy doesn't have.
Yeah. So I live, 40 minutes outside the city. And I have a heart for that. What would you say to the people in my church that say, yeah, I'm open. How can I help the fatherless in the culture?
Yeah.
Even from, I don't live in the city.
Right.
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 So what's something the white suburban church can do in this space just practically?
Well, I think practically reaching out to urban churches, one, finding out if they even have like a ministry like that, and if they don't, helping to be the brains behind it and to be the resources behind it to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times there are ideas like that. And sometimes people just, in some ways you have to think like an entrepreneur for
Yeah.
even something like this. Even though it's not about a business, but you have to think organizationally, okay, how do we take these 50 kids within a 5-mile radius of our church that we know have single moms and grandmoms raising them? Like how do you even organize that? How do you vet them
Yep.
to the proper dad role model? Right, like helping
you
bring.
You
that
worked
type of
with a
thing.
teen ministry in Philadelphia for a lot of years.
Yeah.
What was the kind of the model that you worked in Teen Haven?
Well, what Teen Haven was awesome about doing, we would just go into the inner city and pick up these teenagers and do Bible studies with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so our main focus was like discipling the kids. But again, one of the things that I saw, I would bring a van full of kids to a local church that we were partnered with, where we could use their gym.
Back when you could drive a van around and pick up kids.
Back when
in
you
a
could
van.
drive around and do that, right? And we're sitting there and we're having a Bible study and we're talking about the gospel and we're talking about how to deal with life in light of the crime and all of that. But we're talking to teenagers.
Yeah.
We're not talking to the parents. It's amazing. Back then, the parents didn't even like sign off on anything.
Yeah.
I would come on a corner and just hit the Teen Haven horn. And here they come out the row homes. Hey, Mr. Jones, hey, sit down. Hey, put your, and you might see a mom waving or whatever, right? So
I did the same thing when I worked in Denver for a summer as an intern at a church there, and there was a real big Hispanic community and kind of these projects just down the street. Took a white van and went around, picked up kids and brought them to church.
Yep,
And then
absolutely.
I dropped them off back home, and moms were like, "Oh, see you, Doug.
Yeah.
See you," and
yeah,
it's a different world. I think you could still do that to some degree in the inner city, but I understand it's different now. But as far as being a father to the fatherless, I think that's and we're not going to solve it today, but I think it's something that the white American church, if we have strong fathers, and our church is full of strong fathers,
right,
really good families. So it's one thing to say, okay, look to do that in your own church with this, the single moms in your own church, which we certainly have an effort to do. But this conversation sparks us to say, what can we do more to address being a father to the fatherless?
Right.
In our own communities and even the communities beyond us. Moving on, with the discussion of white privilege, the other aspect of it I've heard is one of the reasons you have privilege, just by nature of the color of your skin, is you don't have to worry about certain things that young black men have to worry about.
Right.
So, for instance, I can go I go on a jog through my white suburban neighborhood every morning, and there's this one section where it's a really nice, wealthier, big homes, and I kind of run through it. Not once have I ever, running through that neighborhood, thought anything about it. Like,
Right.
do I
Your
belong
safety
here?
or
My
anything.
safety, or
Right.
is anyone going to give me a
Right.
problem? If anyone give me a hard time, is a police officer driving by going to question why I'm there? Never even crossed my mind. Whereas someone who's black might say, yeah, if I was doing the same thing, it would cross my mind. I would almost be afraid, or in fact, maybe I wouldn't even run through your neighborhood for fear.
Yep.
So that by itself is a form of privilege.
Right.
Speak to that for a minute in our culture. Do black men walk around with a greater fear than white men?
Yeah. I think many do. Yes, and it goes back to what we were saying before. You go back to the laws that were in place, and we're still talking about ripple effects that you're still going to feel, right? And so we're looking at the end result of some of these laws that were in place for so long, okay? Listen, you can't have slavery in a country for 200 years, and then once it's gone, everything is just going to equal out as far as education and business, entrepreneurship. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that slavery is still in tow, right? It's like, no, but this is kind of the outworking. So part of the outworking of where our country has come from, because even though the law may not be there, there are still people who are bona fide racists. That doesn't mean that there's a law that says, I'm going to treat Ron differently, but that particular store owner, he could just be racist.
Yeah.
And whether he got it from being raised, whether he got it from growing up in some of the Jim Crow era, whether he got it from, but again, this is where we say as Christians, well, it's a hard issue. So are there places that I could take you and I would be treated one way and you would be treated another way? Let's flip it.
Yeah, right.
Let's flip it
Yep.
to black privilege.
Yeah, there
could
are some
take-
neighborhoods where I wouldn't run in those neighborhoods.
and you would not have the privilege of running in those neighborhoods. You see, so we could flip this thing, right?
true.
There are some restaurants I could take you to in the inner city where the owner will kind of look at you and like, what's he doing here, but what can I get for you? So we could flip it, right? So now what is that? Is there a law on the books that say that a white brother can't eat at this little rib shack in the, no, that's that personal owner who has a heart issue against you. Flip it the other way. I know there are places where I've gone, even in this area, and I get looks and I get questioned. Why am I getting looked and questioned? Where if you went, they probably wouldn't question you. Well, see that? Systemic racism still exists. I say, wait. That person may be racist, but you can't then make the assumption, well, it's because of, well, that's the skunk is dead, the odor still stinks. He's part of the odor that still stinks. But there's no law on the books that says I can't be in that particular development. That's him saying that. See the difference? And absolutely, there is the mindset where people judge because of your skin color. And if that person is a racist, they're going to judge you accordingly.
Yeah. The pushback to it from white people is, well, 75-80% of the crimes in that neighborhood are committed by black people, so the whole kind of racial profiling with crime, so
Right.
So, just because I'm black, I'm a thug, or just because I'm black, I'm a criminal, and so when I walk into a store, if I'm black, I automatically get the hairy eyeball from the the store owner.
Right.
The white
Right.
person might, and so white people push back and say, well, that's because maybe, and it doesn't make it right, but it's maybe because
The last two guys that robbed him were black.
people
Right.
dressed just like you.
Exactly. Right. Right. Yep.
And so,
And there's truth to that.
yeah,
Right? There's truth to that.
so if 90% of the crime is within this demographic, people that look like this, they're dressed similar to this,
Right.
the store owner might be a little nervous when people dressed like that, that look
Right.
like that come in.
Right.
Is that racism?
Right.
Is that wrong on his
Yeah,
part?
And I think that's wrong when people jump right to the point, therefore you're a racist.
Yeah.
Here's why. Monique and I, remember when we were first dating? So I'm going back
26 years.
6 years ago. We
Yeah.
dated for 1 year, then we got married. We're down in Philly. And we just in love and just stupid in love,
Yeah.
right? I parked my car somewhere downtown, I forget, on one of those little side streets, and then we just start walking, talking. Well, we ended up, like, not in Center City anymore. We were just walking the city. Now it's at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I start seeing people on corners. What do you think went through my head? Oh, there's my brother. Let me ask him for directions. I said, babe, let's walk over here.
Yeah.
Oh, am I racist?
Yeah.
No, but I know that neighborhood, and I know those guys on the corner there, they could be packing. Oh, you're prejudging. No, I'm not prejudging. There's a fact that on that corner, shootouts have happened.
Yeah.
That is a fact. I'm using wisdom and say I have a female with me at 11 o'clock at night. 3 guys are over there looking at me. We going this way. Does that make me a racist? You see what I'm saying? So that's where that whole narrative kind of falls apart. Okay? Incidentally, we saw a cop car. And I walked up to the cop car. White cop. And he looked up and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Officer, I know this is going to sound crazy. This is my girlfriend. We parked our car somewhere, and I can't remember where it is. We just been walking. We stopped at a little restaurant, and he just looked at me. And he looked at her. He said, 'Get in.' We got in the back of his car, and he said, 'What was around where you parked?' And I'm like, 'I don't know. Was it like, it was a side street? Was it?' Turns out we had parked in Rittenhouse Square off on a little side street. We were 21 blocks away from Rittenhouse. Now that's love, folks.
Yeah.
That's love.
Yeah.
You didn't even know where you were. And he just laughed. and as he's driving, we finally get there. He said, 'It sounds like you're right off of Rittenhouse.' He said, 'What kind of car do you have?' And back then I had my Gremlin, my white Gremlin.
Oh, yeah.
Sure enough, he pulls up. He says, 'Is that your car?' I said, 'That's it. Thank you so much.' And he was just laughing like, 'Wow. Thank you, officer. Be safe, guys.'" So again, the narrative, this is where you got to be careful with all. You got to be careful with using all, because there are even black people in the urban context that don't trust other black people when they walk in their store with a hoodie.
Yeah.
So let's not just relegate that to how the white store owner responds.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think sometimes, because of growing up with that kind of hovering over you all the time, why are they looking at me, why are they
Right.
following me?
Yep.
Sometimes you maybe judge a white person
Absolutely.
thinking, "Oh, why are they looking at me? They must be racist," when that might be the case at all. And
I've done it. I've done it.
yeah, well, I'll remind you of a story. I remember one time you were talking about you were in some furniture store or something, walking around.
Oh, the vacuum, the high-end
Was it the
vacuum cleaner
Well,
store.
I remember you telling me the story, and you're telling me, "Hey, I walked in, and and you were the only guy in there, and you were
Yep,
black,
yep.
in Quakertown, Pennsylvania,
Yep.
so not a huge black population up there, and the dude just kept following you around.
Yep.
"Can I help you, sir? Can I
Yep.
help you?" And you're like, "No, I'm good. I'm good." And you just kind of nah, but he kept following you. He kept following you.
Mhm.
And I remember you telling me, thinking, "Man, it just bothered you,
Yep,
right?
it
Like,
did.
why is he doing this? Probably, And I remember sitting there thinking, well, how were you dressed? And you're like, "I came off work. I probably had a tie on, a
Yep.
collared shirt, dressed sharp." I said, "Well, maybe he didn't think you were going to steal something. Maybe he thought you were rich and he needed to meet his quota for the month, and he could get a sale from you, right?"
Right, right.
And so there is an aspect of it's like, oh, fair enough. Maybe you need to be careful about jumping on white
Absolutely.
people too much and judging that, oh, well, they're just looking at me because I'm black.
Yep,
Maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, and see, that's the problem when we get the narrative pumped into our head, and this is what I hate about social media, because social media gives you a soundbite
Yeah.
and doesn't give you the whole story,
Yep.
and everybody gets charged up, right? That's been happening for decades,
Yeah.
right? And then so you assume, and God has convicted me many a times when I've walked into a situation and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being treated different because of the color of my skin, and then I come to find out, no, the reason this fancy restaurant sat that white couple behind you is because they had reservations.
Right.
And when the person saw them, they frequent the restaurant, even though they took my name, and then looked at the white couple and said, "Come this way." And I'm like, "Oh, what?"
Right.
Right away, if I would have gone on social media and been like, "See, this is what we're talking about, systemic racism." And then when I sat down and come to find out, like, I didn't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
Like, the waitress says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're so busy. Oh, that other couple, they come on, they always sit here, they have reservations." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I didn't think anything different."
So from a biblical perspective, as Christians living in
Yeah.
a world, whether you're white or black, I think the principle here is let's not jump to
Yeah.
conclusions with one
Absolutely.
another. This is called grace, right?
Yep.
Giving grace,
Yep.
Extending mercy, giving the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without emotionally kind of jumping to a conclusion that may or may not be true.
Absolutely.
And I think if we operate within that vein, that example that Jesus gave us,
That's right. That's right.
I really think it'll create less tension and open up more opportunity for dialogue and conversation and
Absolutely.
relationships.
Absolutely, man. We need to judge each person individually.
Yeah.
You know, that's, by the way, that's how God's going to judge us, right? Right?
Yep.
Like our character. And so when I hear people talk these narratives, oh man, the white man, I stop them.
Yeah.
I say, what's his name?
Yeah.
Well, you know, come on, Ron, you know the white man. What's his name? Who's keeping you from getting a job? Give me his name. Because if there's a white man standing in front of Walmart not allowing you to come in and apply, that's a problem. Let's go get an attorney and we can deal with that.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, no, I'm just saying, you know, I'm not going to, and it's like,
Well,
okay.
and so when you talk about white privilege that certainly existed back then, does it really exist now? Well, maybe some ripple effects of it. Fair
Right,
enough.
right.
I do remember a conversation we had as we sat around a table with black and white men in Philadelphia to
Right,
talk about race.
right.
It was just kind of this roundtable discussion we had, and you had some older black guys there that, I mean, they were jaded and they had still some anger in them.
Sure.
Christian men,
Yep.
love Jesus, want to reach people, but still had this jaded kind of anger because of what they experienced
Right.
back in the 50s and the 60s. You know,
Absolutely.
they're in their late 70s, even early 80s now.
Yep.
And you can see it's there, and there's still a fight
Mm-hmm.
about it. Across the table, you see a young man in his early 30s, black man.
Yeah. Oh, he was younger. He was like 20-something.
Yeah. And he looks at the older guy and says, I don't know what the big deal is you guys are making of all this. That's
Right.
all stuff in the past. That's gone. He
Right.
says, I went to college, got a good degree. I didn't have any issues. I don't know why you guys are creating all this drama.
Right. Yep.
And so you even see it in the black community between the generations.
There is.
And
Yeah.
I want to have a lot of compassion for the old guy who went through some incredible injustice.
Mhm.
I don't even know the half of
Yeah.
what he experienced.
Right. Right.
It would probably be a good idea to sit down and listen to that sometime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the same time, to listen to the young black man growing up in the city saying it's different now.
Yeah.
So it is important to move forward.
Absolutely. And see, here's the thing. You bring up a good point because the laws of the Jim Crow laws that were enforced in the southern states, if you're a black man in the South, your experience is different
That's true.
than if you're a black man in the North.
True.
And that's the other issue.
Yeah.
So again, whereas white people can say, like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, that's fine you don't understand, but know that there can't be a denial of our history
Yep.
and the ripple effect.
Yep.
But then in the same vein, you have black people who will look at other black people and say, you guys are just complaining. Just get up and get a job and get an education. I worked my way through college and got 2 degrees. What is your excuse? Stop blaming the white man.
Yep.
And then those black people, they don't get credibility. And a lot of other blacks will look at those black people and say, you guys are Uncle Toms.
Yeah.
It's like, because I got an education, because I use proper English?
Yeah.
Really? So again, we got to look at individuals, look at people as being made in the image of God, and deal with each individual person.
Yeah.
Again, if there's a black and white law that's wrong on the books, absolutely.
after it, yeah.
Legislate, go after it, absolutely. But don't look at the laws that were there and act as if nothing has changed. Because, you know.
All right, well, that'll wrap things up for today. Great
right.
discussion, and thank everyone for tuning in. Sorry about our audio Amazon microphone issues.
You just throwing Amazon under the boat,
Yeah.
bus.
Well, that one's a great one.
Yeah, yeah.
Apparently.
Well, I
So I love
appreciate that,
Amazon.
you know.
When the stuff works. But we'll get. Hey, we're a work in progress.
Right. Right.
Sanctification,
It's all good.
right?
Sanctification, man.
Right. God just
Absolutely.
continues to conform us. So,
Yes. Amen.
So we will see you guys next week
All
on
right,
the Black
John,
and
don't
White
forget to play
podcast.
that music going out, bro.
Oh,
Play
yeah.
that music going
Roll
out.
it.
All right.